Hey, what's going on, dudes and dudettes? I'm the Mystical Green Beanie. So, for a while, I was writing this big, comprehensive analysis of Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's new X-Men series from the early 2000s, but I realized something recently. First of all, the YouTube algorithm doesn't like it when videos are too long, which I've been really guilty of recently. But second, everything I had to say can be summed up pretty easily in a 10 to 15 minute video. First things first, I really should get this out of the way. I'm not the biggest X-Men reader. I like the concept of the X-Men. I like the movies. I love the animated shows. X-Men Evolution is the best. You can fight me all you want on that, but you're wrong. But I haven't really read a lot of X-Men comics. In fact, I was talking to a buddy of mine recently, and I think he was having a really hard time processing the fact that I've been reading comics for like 15 years, and I've never once read Giant Size X-Men. So, yeah, I'm one of those guys. But I have read Days of Futures Past, and I have read God Loves, Man Kills, along with every other X-Men comic where Kitty Pryde calls people a nigger. Point is, I've only really read this, and for whatever godforsaken reason, everything between this and this, as well as pretty much everything in the Ultimate Universe. So when I call myself an X-Men normie, you can take me at my word. That said, I hold a lot of reverence for the Morrison Quitely X-Men run because that was the material that was coming out when I was a kid and first getting into comics. So for me, this is the X-Men, which is funny considering how this series was a drastic reinvention of the X-Men, and thematically is all about action and reaction in the face of change. So, going a little deeper into that idea, the book opens with two scenes that really establish the mood. The first is a VR demonstration of Homo sapiens wiping out the last of the Neanderthals, while one of the book's main antagonists, Cassandra Nova, tries to convince a member of the Trask family to help her gain access to a super sentinel so that she can kill as many mutants as she possibly can, so that humanity doesn't follow the steps of the Neanderthal. And that moment is followed up with the X-Men hanging out in their brand new uniforms, building a brand new high-tech Cerebra system. The first is this horrifying display of a primitive notion of superiority through violence and aggression, and the setting then shifts to the children of the future stepping into the embrace of tomorrow by constructing something new to benefit their people. And there's this very old wave versus new wave ideology that's present throughout the series, and you can especially sense that in the art. Frank Quitely has this real new age techno-punk meets retro-futurism art style, and it really shouldn't work, but it does. And it visually cues you into those old versus new ideas. An idea that's made even more literal when Charles Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters is actually transformed into a school where children go and, learn math and biology and ethics and shit. And in that change, even though it wasn't really the will of Charles Xavier and was the result of Cassandra Nova trying to sabotage and kill the X-Men by outing them, Charles takes that change in stride and continues on as the school's headmaster, nurturing young minds academically as well as training them on how to protect themselves and each other, adopting a new way of thinking about how to help his fellow man. And Charles isn't the only one to undergo an evolution of character like this. Everybody in the book, well, except maybe Wolverine, undergoes a metamorphosis. And we see how that change affects not only them, but the people around them as a result. And the book really does a good job of commenting on the morality of change, and how there's good change, as well as there's bad change. But it's never truly binary, and there's an ethical spectrum that evolution rests on. Sometimes change will make us the best versions of ourselves, but it's at the detriment of all those around us. And sometimes change will make us the worst versions of ourselves, but also results in others around you breaking the chains of stagnation and evolving into whoever they think they're supposed to be. I also think that on a character level, this book is quintessential X-Men, because it really gets to the heart of who each of the X-Men are as individuals and as people, while also putting them through the ringer and moving them forward into new status quos. For example, Emma Frost is a bitch. Like, a top-class, true-to-form, aristocratic cunt. But that's just her personality. And Morrison really delves into why she is the way she is, and why she feels the need to seduce men and seek the attention of a man who's married. All of those personality traits come from a very specific place, but in a way, as much as they define her, they also don't, if that makes any sense. Because she too is willing to, in her own way, turn a new leaf, and to some extent, act outside of herself for the benefit of others. And you can contrast Emma's arc with Scott's. Morrison quietly firmly reestablished Scott Summers as the innocent but repressed Boy Scout, and he's constantly acting out of a sense of selflessness and fights the simple urge to be selfish. And we see this on display most explicitly when he's being tempted by Emma Frost while trying to hold out with Jean while they're having a stay of celibacy, even though they're married, I think? Yeah, like I said, my understanding of the X-Men is very limited, so I could be missing something that ties into something else, but yeah, it was very confusing to me, to say the least. But Scott's character arc ends when he's finally pushed in the direction of being more selfish and wanting something for himself by Jean, of all people, after she transcends time and space and becomes the Phoenix. Again, which I'll talk about. But there's this beautiful moment where Scott finally accepts the fact that he's different now. And maybe he doesn't have to be defined by his love for Jean and can move on to someone else and be something else. Something other than the right-hand man. Maybe it's his time to be the head that wears the crown and lead the next generation to victory for himself. And as I just mentioned, there's Jean Grey, and Jean, I feel, she has this arc, especially after this reading, where she's locked in a constant state of change, and because of that, she'll never change. Again, I really hope that makes sense, because it makes perfect sense in my head, but then again, so does the Martha scene from BVS, so either I'm really bad at explaining my train of thought, or I'm just retarded. But yeah, Jean is always changing and trying to find an identity for herself, and I like how in the end, she finally accepts what I think Morrison is saying she's been running from for so long. This notion of relative godhood and the stability that comes with it. Transcending the bonds of the three-dimensional world and accepting her role as an avatar for the Phoenix. Which, by the way, I don't exactly know how the Phoenix works, but I get the feeling from this run at least that the Phoenix is a cosmic entity that's beyond time and space and has to experience itself subjectively, which is just a fascinating idea. And having Jean accept that part of her being is just really fascinating, and works really well when she finally decides to let Scott go and tells him to be with another woman and rebuild the Xavier Institute. And for Jean, her change is ethically neutral, I think? I don't know, this is one that I still have to think about a little more. But getting to the respective far ends of the spectrum, we have Magneto and Charles, who each represent the far extremes of the ethical evolutionary spectrum. With Charles, it's that idea of throwing his hands in the air and saying, I'm done. It's time to hand the reins off to the next generation because that's the inevitability of change. It's this idea of finally moving on. Because if you don't, and you shackle yourself to a specific train of thought or a way of doing things, you wind up becoming the worst version of yourself. And in the case of Magneto, who is a dark mirror for Charles in that respect, he becomes the very thing that he had sworn to destroy. A genocidal maniac who's hell-bent on eradicating the others for the sake of his glorious master race, joining him in the sunlight of what he deems a brighter tomorrow.
Ironic.
And I know that a lot of X-Men fans don't like this idea because they're really uncomfortable with the idea of Magneto becoming mutant Hitler. But I think that's the brilliance of it all. But this is also coming from a dude who's not a hardcore X-Men fan, so I'm not too terribly invested in the sanctity of these characters, if I'm gonna be honest. I'm just taking everything in as a story. And as a whole run, I think the story is really good. Again, it's quintessential X-Men. I didn't even talk about the social political commentary. It's very 2000 AD. There's a lot of tongue-in-cheek humor in this series, but as funny as it is, it's also really biting, and unfortunately, what was once parody now feels like reality. Because I'll go on record to say that this comic is prophetic. Like, you look at everything going on with Black Lives Matter and how these corporations are supporting Black Lives Matter, but you gotta ask yourself, are they really doing it for any reason that's truly morally altruistic, or are they just doing it to trick the masses into buying their product? It's all very similar to Sublime and the U-Men. And speaking of, there's this notion throughout the series with the U-Men where they're these loser-ass humans who wanted to feel special by othering themselves, and they do this by genetically altering their bodies by harvesting mutant organs. And for all their talk about being liberal progressives, they're just as bad as the conservative governments who wish to eradicate the mutants in the first place. Arguably worse because they're doing it under the guise of being allies. There's also a lot of commentary on teenage rebellion and how it often comes from a really good place, but is often misguided, especially within minority communities. But then the question becomes, who's at fault when they start hurting people in the name of a good cause? Is it the fault of the establishment who failed their communities in the first place? Obviously, yes. But also, more intimately, is it the fault of their radical fathers who told them to build a better future by any means necessary? Or is it the fault of their more passive predecessors who were fighting for a peaceful coexistence with people who never really thought of them as, well, people in the first place? Or are they both equally to blame for not coming to a healthy compromise sooner? Yeah, more sitting quietly predicted the future here, and I fucking hate it because it's so real. But that's also why I appreciate it. All in all, I love this series. I think it's peak X-Men so far, because Hickman's X-Men is amazing. And speaking of Hickman, I feel like a lot of his run so far is heavily inspired by Morrison and Quietly's X-Men. In a lot of ways, they feel like companion pieces. So if you're reading Hickman's X-Men currently, I highly recommend checking out Morrison, assuming you haven't read it already, which I'm sure most X-Men fans have. But if you haven't, let me know if this video has prompted you to check it out. Or even if you're less inclined to check it out now even. And to those who have read it, what do you think about Morrison and Quietly's run? How does it stack up compared to other X-Men things, both in the comics as well as external media? And what do you think of Magneto's plot twist? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Let me know down below in the comments section. Also, if you like this video, hit the like button, share to support the channel. And if you want to see more content like this, all you have to do is subscribe. I'm the Mystical Green Beanie. Thanks for watching, and as always, until next time, adios nachos, adios.